I've been looking for a house with no walls or no whispers.
Hi, this is Empowering Women Everywhere, and I am your host, Nan Gill. And today our guest is Louise Luck, and she is a mitigation specialist and sentencing advocate, and she's here to tell you all about what that means. Louise?
Thank you, Nan. A mitigation specialist is an individual that works on the penalty phase of a capital death penalty case. As a part of the job as a mitigation specialist, you're involved in putting together the comprehensive social history that's used at the penalty. It's the government's prerogative when they are moving ahead with the death penalty to explain what their aggravators are. The mitigation specialist's job is to find what the mitigators are. And I find this by doing numerous family interviews of friends, neighbors, teachers, psychologists, and visiting our client numerous times. Either they're in capital cases, they're in prison, and I visit them numerous times in prison, and I reach out and I collect every bit of written material there is on them. School records, psychiatric records, employment records, Social Security records, disability records, and really try to get to understand my client, to almost be able to walk in their shoes and kind of feel what they were feeling, and best be able to explain to the jury who this client is. So it's a very, very, very comprehensive social history. And I find this work very interesting and very challenging, because you really get to uncover a lot of times secrets, things that clients didn't even realize about themselves, because now you're really asking people to open up and trust you and share information they may have not shared, and there might be information that our client never even knew about themselves. Oftentimes our clients were victims of very horrible abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and these are secrets and things that have been covered oftentimes by families. It's very difficult to talk about, but we try to encourage an environment of safety and trust and getting to know somebody, be able to delve into these issues.
And when do you actually come into the conversation? After they're sentenced, before they're sentenced?
That's a very good question. As soon as the government decides that they want to pursue the death penalty and indicate that they want to file aggravators on a case, we're usually brought in at that time. And it's usually years before you actually go to trial. There was a case I recently finished up on that I was hired 12 years earlier. I would probably say the typical period of time is somewhere like between 2 and 3 years from the time I get a case until the time it goes to trial. And oftentimes, in a lot of cases, it's because we really have to gather more information. Oftentimes the government has a lot of information by the time they arrest our person and they've done their interviews, their factual interviews. It's our interviews that really, the trust building interviews and getting people to open up on things that have been often hidden, that takes much longer, and to accumulate the records we need. And sometimes that's why when you hear of a capital case taking years to come to trial, it's because of the work that oftentimes that the mitigation team is working on. And I'm part of a team. And on a capital case, there's 2 attorneys.
Okay.
Myself as a mitigation specialist, and also an investigator. The American Bar Association put together standards of performance on death penalty cases, and they treat them differently from other criminal cases.
Now, does the individual family have to hire you, or how are you hired?
That's another very good question. No, I'm hired either through the most oftentimes through the public defender's office,
Okay.
but depending on who'll pay me. Sometimes it's the county, sometimes that's out of the court budget or the public defender's budget.
How did you decide that this was your passion and that you wanted to get involved in this?
I don't think it was something you actually ever decided on.
Okay.
What happened was, probably as a young kid, I believe that we all have special gifts. And
we do.
Thanks for agreeing with that. But from the time that I was a young child, I felt that my gift was I always wanted to help people. And I felt that I was a good listener, and I would talk to my friends and listen to their problems and try to give advice. And by the time I decided to go to when I was college age, I thought that I wanted to continue this. So I decided to be a psychology major. And when I was finishing up my last year over at SUNY New Paltz, one of my friends had said, "Why don't we take the probation officer test?" And I said, "What's a probation officer?" He goes, "I'm not sure, but we're eligible for it because we're going to have a bachelor's degree." So I ended up taking the test, but I went immediately on to pursue my master's. And when I was in my last semester of my master's, I got a call from Orange County to ask me if I would come to interview for probation officer. So I was working full-time during the day, and I finished up my master's full-time at night. And from that period on, probably from the time I was like 20, 23, 24 years old, I've been involved in the criminal justice system.
And then, how did you get into this form of it? I mean,
Well, this is kind of what happened. From years ago, when I started off at probation, I loved the job, and I loved being able to work with our clients, counsel them, help them
right.
in times of crisis. And usually, for a lot of times with people that have mental health problems, a lot of them get involved in the criminal justice system, and people get involved with the criminal justice system for different problem areas. So, as a probation officer, I tried to identify what their problem areas were,
right.
and try to get them help in the areas that they needed, and kind of oversaw it. And back in the day, there was a big exodus of probation officers because a lot of them left to go to the state, because at that period of time, we would like double our salary. And I had 2 young children to take care of, and I left to work for the state of New York,
mm-hmm.
and I went to work for them as a corrections counselor. So I was still able to counsel people, and now I got to know the criminal justice system even better, because before I got to know it as a probation officer,
right.
now I got to know it from a state prison and what state prison clients' needs were. So I was able to evaluate their cases, counsel them, review their programs, see what their programming needs were. And eventually I also went, while working corrections, I transferred over and worked for the New York State Division of Parole, New York Parole. And I did parole memorandums. And I always felt that this was a perfect fit. I was able to see people in crisis, being
right.
able to help them, be able to counsel them. And while I was working for corrections, I saw a private sentencing memorandum come in. Now, a client always has a right to get letters to write about themselves, or other people to talk about them and bring this to the judge. But when I was working in corrections, I saw a very lovely prepared document that was done by an agency out of Long Island, and I said, "Isn't this great? This is,
mm-hmm.
this would be something that would be my dream,
right.
to be able to really work with a smaller number of clients and be even more effective in helping my clients achieve what they want to achieve, break their bad habits and substitute better habits, and have the advice and guidance of someone that's working with them, not as a psychologist, as a friend, as an advocate."
Okay.
And that's how probation was initially set up in our country. But the probation officers are doing a wonderful job considering the caseloads and work
right.
they have. But I felt that if I was able to work with a smaller number of people, even how much more effectual that would be.
For their lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not only for theirs, but for society. Because if someone's having a problem, whether it be a DWI or an anger management problem that may result in danger for others, these areas have to be addressed. And that's why I really
yeah.
love this field. So I got this private sentencing memo, and I left corrections, and I was able to pursue my dream. And my dream was to be able to help people privately, do a smaller number of cases, and that's how I developed Court Consultation Services.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off doing sentencing memorandums, and I got busier and busier, and I had a lot of attorney recommendations, and I have to say, in all the work that I've done, I don't think that I could have got to the position I am in now without the help of so many people that mentored me along the way.
Right.
So many attorneys and advice, and it's been invaluable. And I think that's so important for us in every area of our lives to reach out and help others. And I've been very fortunate that that happened towards me. And I hope to do the same for others as well. So I was able to reach out and started doing quite a number of sentencing memos. And I was dealing a very complicated sexual abuse case that was in 2 counties. And I did a large presentation between the counties, and one of the district attorneys asked me if I had ever, or would I ever be interested in doing mitigation work. And quite truthfully, that period of time, I wasn't too sure what he was talking about.
Right.
And I was thinking, is this a position at the DA's office? So I contacted him, and I got back in touch with him, and he told me no, it was working on death penalty cases, and his county had a death penalty case, and they had a large non-for-profit in New York at that time come and help them and advocate on a client's behalf on a death penalty case. And he put me in touch with that individual, whose name is Russ Stetler, and he's amazing. He's in California now, but he used to be in New York, and an amazing mitigation specialist in our field, and I look up to him tremendously. And I spoke to him a bit, and I really felt that I was ready after all these years to kind of bring this next level and get more training in capital mitigation. And I train every year, several times a year, even up to this time. And I would say probably for the last maybe close to 18 years, I've been involved now primarily. I still do some non-capital cases, but primarily involved with the death penalty work.
And some of the cases that you've had, 12 years, 13 years.
Yes.
It takes a long time on this.
Yes. Yeah. At this point, I've done capital cases. I've done state cases, Commonwealth cases. I've done federal cases. New York is now pursuing its death penalty here. I probably now I'm doing the vast majority of my cases in PA. But then I get called from other states throughout the country, because there may be a component of a case, even if the case is out west or down south, there may be a component in New York, meaning there's people to interview in this area. So I've really worked with cases and courts throughout the country, and it's really been my honor to be able to do this and be able to help my clients.
What are some of the challenges that you encounter in this profession and working?
Well, every particular case is unique, and every case has its own challenges. I would probably say that the general challenge that I see in most cases is that some of these traumas are so severe that there are hidden secrets within the family. And oftentimes you can't set a timetable and say, well, on the second interview now they're going to open up with me. And there's been cases, there's several that I can think of that I don't think the family ever, opened up to be receptive to talk about the trauma our clients has been through. When I do my initial interview of a client, I kind of, in my own analogy, say that I put together the skeleton, and I need the family and other people that know them to put together the meat. If I explain everything just from my client's point of view and say this information was taken from my client, oftentimes that's not viewed as extremely credible, because it could be viewed as self-serving.
Right.
So I really need to help them hear from multiple sources, and which I try to corroborate with through paper. So if there was social services involvement with child abuse or any other records that document what I've heard, I try to substantiate my resources from multiple sources.
Are there any cases that have happened prior, or cases that you're able to speak about where you've been very successful?
Well, I think that we have a tremendous success record. I mean, I've worked on over 300 capital cases, and of those 300, there's only been 2 that were convicted of murder in the first degree and sentenced to death, and they both are on death row now. So out of 300, that was a very good outcome. But still, these 2, I still think of them every single day.
Yeah, so that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's nothing you can do after.
It'll go through the appeal process. I save their files. I save everything to be forwarded over to the next group of attorneys to take take a look at.
Right. So there's been 300 cases, and is there one in particular that stands out?
Oh, they all stand out. I mean, I can't say I'm very, my win is when someone gets life. And, you know, of course, that's my goal. At the penalty phase, the jury has just two choices. It's life without parole or capital murder, death penalty. Now, you did ask about a success, and I'm thinking of two off the top of my head.
Okay.
And these cases had much better outcomes. And sometimes, if the information that we have is so substantial and so critical, it may be used to help negotiate a plea other than having the government pursue the death penalty. And there's one I recently had several years ago out in PA, a young girl that was accused of killing her baby with her boyfriend. And I did a lot of interviews, record search, and I found out that this young lady was deemed intellectually disabled with an IQ way below 70.
Oh my.
And as a result of the information that we were able to bring through the court, we were able to negotiate for her a plea. I believe it was murder in the third degree, which carried a cap. That means the most you can get of 20 years. And I was able to do a sentencing memorandum for her at that point. And we were so happy that she was from possibly serving the death penalty, getting executed. We got her 7 years.
Wow.
And there was another case that I had done up in Bradford County, Pennsylvania, maybe about 12 years ago. A similar situation where the person pled to murder in the third degree, ended up with 7 years as well. He had been accused of killing his son-in-law, and then that particular son-in-law was accused of sexually abusing his grandchildren. But when we went into his history and his own personal abuse, the court was able to see how he reacted as a result of his own history when he thought his own grandchildren were going through what he went through as a child.
Oh, yes.
So some of this information, if it's very critical to the particular case, can be utilized in a number of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two very big victory stories, and I think about them often too.
Yeah. So there was a ruling through what organization that made it necessary to have someone work on the person's behalf?
That was the American Bar Association.
Okay.
And they put together a document called Standards of Performance on Death Penalty Cases.
Okay.
And in those standards, it indicates the important role of a mitigation specialist in putting together that social history. And prior to that, oftentimes it would be attorneys interviewing the mother or father of the defendant a couple nights before trial and saying that he was a good boy and they don't know why this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not enough to save lives.
Right.
And now the American Bar Association knows that the importance of having us involved in every case. And as a result of that, we've been able to save many more lives and be able to give the jury, most importantly, give the jury the information they need in making the proper determination if this person should get life without parole or the death penalty.
Now, I would imagine that a lot of it has to do with the feeling of the public around a certain case, whether or not they are more or less skewed towards death penalty or mitigation.
Well, that the juries have to, that the lawyers have to figure out when they are doing jury selection.
Right.
But also when a jury is at penalty, a death penalty case, maybe we should explain this, has two trials. Okay. The first one is guilt and innocence. And the jury has to determine, was the person guilty of murder in the first degree or a lesser count? If they're guilty of a lesser count, then they don't go on to penalty.
Right.
If they were convicted of murder in the third degree, the judge has a probation officer do a probation report, they look at the information, and the judge will sentence. But in the case of, on a capital case, if it's the jury finds that they're guilty of murder in the first degree at the first trial, then that same jury of 12 people has to hear the penalty phase. And they cannot take into consideration the murder itself anymore,
Right.
because they've already convicted the person of that.
Right.
They have to take into consideration the aggravating circumstances. And there's a number of aggravators that the government can pursue. Probably the most common aggravator was this murder committed in the commission of another felony. For example, I decide I like your cup, and I'm going to steal your cup from you and shoot you. If you just shoot somebody, and there's nobody else in the room, or there's no other aggravating circumstances, it's just not just a murder, but it's not a capital murder. If there's an aggravator involved in it, that would make it a capital murder. And an aggravator, like I said, the most common one would be commission of another felony. It could be substantial prior violent criminal history. It could be a victim under the age of 12. It could be torture. It could be multiple victims. It could be that the victim was a law enforcement officer. There's a number of aggravators that the government can use. And then in terms of the mitigators, there's statutory mitigators, such as you can't be under a certain age, you can't kill
Right.
juveniles, and then it's up to the mitigation specialist to put on all the other mitigators. So there's anything else that we find can be determined as mitigators, but the government is limited in what they can determine as aggravators.
Right. So your job, what does that entail? I mean, what does a day for you involve?
There's multiple days because there's multiple different functions you might have. Like
Okay.
there can be days that you're pursuing records. You have your client maybe sign 50 releases and get all his school records from every school he's ever been to, all his employment records, social security records, physical records, because physical or organic brain
Right.
problems or things can affect you. Diabetes and sugar content can affect behavior. There's a lot of different medical issues that can
Right.
affect behavior. Psychological records. So I accumulate all those records. So there's a lot of different days I wear different hats. Sometimes it's chasing down records. Other times it's locating people that I need to interview. Interviewing people in the field. Interviewing our clients, report writing, trying to find what, in addition to the lay witnesses, and lay witnesses I mean like teachers and family
Right.
and neighbors, we also have to identify what expert witnesses would be helpful on a particular case.
Mhm.
So a mitigation specialist wears many different hats, so it's never boring, it's always fascinating. And
Do you find yourself in prison interviewing your client?
very often.
Yeah.
Very often.
So,
Yeah.
and have you ever felt that you're in danger at all as a woman doing this?
I haven't felt that in prison. I had a couple of home visits that were problematic. I'd gone to somebody's house and they were using drugs, and there was 3 people at the house, and one person had a sheet over him and nothing underneath it, and I decided it's about time to go now, and that interview's about
Yeah.
over. And another time when I was interviewing a mother of a client of mine that was charged in a quadruple homicide. She had a little toddler, and she said the toddler was tired, and we had met in a restaurant. She wanted to go back to the house, and she said she was the only one in the house, and it was down in South Philly, in a very bad, drug-infested neighborhood, and other houses were boarded up around there, and
Right.
I went into her house, and she's showing me around and showed me up to the second floor where she was in. She unlocked her door to show me her bedroom, and her boyfriend had been shooting heroin at that point, and it was, I could see it was going to be a pretty dangerous situation because he started getting pretty volatile, and I decided to cut that interview short. But for the most part, in terms of my clients, I haven't had problems with my clients, but as troublesome as it was being in those environments, it really gave me a lot of insight into the kind of life that my client had to live, and what he was brought up with, and what he was exposed to.
Now, can you testify to that, or how would you incorporate that in one of your reports?
I testify to everything I learned.
Okay.
Better yet, I try to get the families to be able to talk about it.
Right.
And I try to help them have the courage to be able to admit to the kind of things that they expose their children to, and things that they in turn were exposed to. So my reports are not just my clients' generations, they're multi-generational social histories.
Okay.
So I even talk about how their grandparents were raised, how their parents were raised, and how that parenting affect my client to this day.
Okay. Very good. So, when you formed your corporation, did you have any special challenges?
Well, it wasn't a corporation. It was set up as like a DBA. So I had to register like in the county building. And,
okay.
But I don't think there was any particular challenges. I try to listen to the needs of the community and see what we need and how best we might be able to serve them. So we do quite a bit of drug testing now for Orange County family courts, and drug testing for a few of the other courts from nearby counties. We also do supervised visitation. We do therapeutic visitation for family court. I have other people in my office that do quite a bit of sentencing advocacy in New York City and other areas. We have several people in my office that specialize in federal work. One gentleman was a federal probation supervisor in the Southern District, and another fellow worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So we try to figure out what the needs of our clients are in all areas and how best to address them.
Okay. All right. And then is there anything in particular that you would like to say about your mission of the organization, and you in particular?
I think the most important thing is every day when I go to work, I don't feel that I'm going to work. This is my chosen field, something that I love to do, so I never feel that I'm working. And I look forward to every day waking up and doing what I have to do to help my clients. And oftentimes they're demonized as villains and horrible people, and yes, they've made bad choices, but it's wonderful to be able to support them, their families, and yet be sensitive to the victims who have suffered tremendously as well. And I think that's an important thing. So I've been very blessed to be able to help people during very tragic times.
Right. Which is more or less what you wanted to do when you were a child.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
We truly enjoyed finding out about the wonderful work you are involved in. It's a tremendous amount. And you deal in all forms of assistance to and work towards mitigating the problem. You did mention that there was a national organization that was you were involved with?
It's the National Alliance of Sentencing Advocates and Mitigation Specialists, and I've been sitting on their executive board. So it's a wonderful organization. It oversees sentencing advocates and mitigation specialists, and offers them educational opportunities and support. And if anyone's in their field or interested in joining and becoming a mitigation specialist, it's a wonderful organization to join.
It's a great field and a wonderful organization. And we want to thank you for watching Empowering Women Everywhere. If you feel that you would like to be on our show, or if you know someone who would benefit by being on our show, please contact us at empoweringwomeneverywhere.tv, and we look forward to seeing you.